So Formadrain is a case that won. The taxpayer went to court and was ultimately successful at the end of the day. They identified various objectives in what they were doing. And basically what they were doing was developing a tube that they could put through pipes, existing pipes, so concrete pipes, that instead of ripping your pipe out when it had a hole in it, they could put a liner in and create a new tube inside of it out of a polymer. It would harden and you wouldn't have to replace the pipe. And they were one of the founders of this technology since 1994 and have been continually improving it. Again, at some point, the Canada Revenue decided that this project was not going to be eligible and had challenged the claimant. So some of the project objectives that were outlined were material thickness of the actual product itself. The claimant actually illustrated that it had to develop a new plastic in order to make this whole product or process happen. So there was uncertainties on the development of the plastic itself that needed to go into it to meet certain criteria, and then also on the method of deployment of that plastic into the tubing process. So the plastic itself had to meet certain thickness requirements. It had to have different criteria on how long it would last once it was opened, as well as the amount of time it required to activate. There were ideally or probably cost constraints, which we're not told about in the court case. There was a goal to allow the plastic to allow different diameters of pipes, so the rheology or viscosity may change to do that. There was goals. We're told there was goals on the weight of the overall plastic that they were developing. We're not told how much, but again, we're given that, and we're told that it had to meet a certain stress resistance. Again, we weren't given those parameters, but what we're given is a nice outline here of objectives that, as they stack up, can create technological uncertainty, so that no single objective in itself may be unachievable, but then when we start to put all the parameters together with the cost targets and techniques, it may create benchmarks or it may create bottlenecks, rather, that create problems on the design. So some of the key variables or uncertainties that the taxpayer identified with the actual design of the chuck design, the composition of the forms, the mold configurations and designs, and so forth. What's interesting about this particular client, and I think a large part of how they won, is the background of the employees themselves, Mr. Terrian and a Mr. O'Reilly. So Mr. Terrian was a civil engineer as president with 20 years experience, and Mr. O'Reilly again was a chemical engineer. So Mr. Terrian was the president. He'd been practicing as a civil engineer since 1993 and had a long career in the industry. Mr. O'Reilly was also a professional engineer with a chemical background. So we have a civil and chemical engineers working together to develop a combined technology, let's say. And therefore were deemed to be qualified. I believe this is important since all of the current cases focus on the technology backgrounds of the individuals, both on the CRA side and on the claimant side. And as we've seen in the case of Joel Theatrical, if you don't have considerable formal training, this can work against you. Whereas if you are provided with a significant amount of formal training in your witnesses, this will be given a high degree of relevance by the courts. Okay, so very quickly looking through the project description or the relevant parts of a project. In the Formadrain solution, we're told that the client wanted to develop this whole system. It had to go from a single access point. basically was done on site and involved the use of different contractors, including a specialist in the development of the plastic itself. We're told that the company itself, as its background, was a world leader in sewer repair, and it owned the licensing technology for this process that it licensed to 36 other companies in Canada and the United States. So again, the results of the Formadrain study were that the judge recognized the technological uncertainty in the formulation, both of the chemical portion of it and on the integration of that plastics technology into the final product and process that needed to go into it. So the various system uncertainties illustrated throughout the development. One of the key things that they noted here too is that the client also hired an expert in the development of the plastics to help them with that part of it and provide feedback. So again, all of these things should be considered on whether the client looked at something that was benchmarked as state-of-the-art and whether in fact they advanced the technology. One of the things that was notable to me in the case is that the client did not provide a strong review of how they benchmarked the prior technology. They didn't talk about the articles or patent searches or anything of that nature. However, one of the things defending them was that the technology itself was proprietary and they were the original developers. So in many cases, when you're the developer of an original technology, there isn't a lot of other jurisprudence or issues or things that you can look at to talk about or someone to ask for guidance. So again, I found that case was relatively significant, not only in that it won, but it also provided us an outline where we could use these cases themselves as a basis for perhaps developing additional projects. As we said, the Canada Revenue Agency used to have projects by industry that we could use as guidelines or benchmarks to say, is something in or something out, and if so, why, and provide an objective measurement for this. So again, as an example, I think this provides a basis for something to use, but there's areas for improvements on how the client might have benchmarked standard practice or prior art in order to make the judgment even more clear.